miracle of God. It's not something that man did not evolve. He's not a separate creature. And the time period prior to man's advent here included many multiple species walking across the earth, including dinosaurs. And I have no concerns whatsoever that God could bring them to the earth and choose whatever means he chose to remove them from the earth.
Michael.
Yeah, there's nothing particularly special about 7-day weeks or 7-day cycles or whatever. There's lots and lots of versions of weeks throughout the last 6,000 years of recorded history. There's nothing sacred or special about 7 days. There's no 7-day biological cycle, for example. There's a 30-day, but I don't think that's biblical. Maybe it is. Am I certain that there are no certainties? Well, I'm not sure about that. As for the dinosaurs, yeah, I'd love to know what deck they were on the ark. Look, you guys are really missing the point of this flood story. You're missing a really good story if you're trying to figure out which deck the dinosaurs were on, how God got the marsupials all the way down to Australia when the boat landed in Mount Ararat over in Turkey. How did they get there? You know, you're missing the point of that story. Go back and read it again. It's not about factual biology. It's about something else.
All right, the last three.
As a biologist, I'm very concerned about Dr. Hovind's misunderstanding of the principles of biological evolution. And since I can't make a statement, Dr. Shermer, can you explain to Dr. Hovind, there's two basic concepts that he isn't understanding. First of all,
Getting close to the statement category.
Okay, well, first of all, can you explain that mutation is not about getting better, it's about being advantageous to a changing environment. And from that, survival of the fittest is not what we're talking about. It's survival to reproduce.
That would work for Jeopardy.
I wanted to thank the doctors for a great discussion. My question is for Dr. Hovind about the flood. You adhere to a literal time scale of 2400 BC for the flood, and yet we have secular history that shows major civilizations and languages before that, when the Tower of Babel had to happen after the flood in about 2100 BC, I think you adhere to. But we have cuneiform and hieroglyphics before that. How do you explain the discrepancy between the flood story and the secular history?
Hi. I was hoping for a little bit more of an argument or hoping to hear more from old world creation. And I was wondering if you could comment on the scripture that says one day to God is like 1,000 years to man.
Let's start with Kyle, go to Michael, and finish with Dr. Hovind.
I think that does show us that to God, the time really isn't as significant of an issue. I think it also shows, you could even work that argument even further and say, well, which 24-hour day did God use? Because our time, 24 hours today, isn't the same as it was 7,000 years ago even. The rotation, the spin of the earth is going shorter. And so I also used to wonder, when I first started into this process of moving into the old earth paradigm, I used to think, well, what was it about light and day that caused God to need to be on some sort of a clock? I mean, and what if God forbid, if you'll excuse the expression, but what if he was off schedule? Would he have to, because it, after all, does imply that creation was a work, and after all, why did he rest at the end of it? And I know that this sounds a little bit crazy, and I don't want to throw it out to you as heresy, because it would be heresy if I said God was diminished in some way by what he did. What I want to say, in fact, is why is it that we have to be so bound up in the clock, day and night, hours, as if God should have been subscribing to that particular time period, as if it makes it more instantaneous, more magical, and more mystical. When I think we can say whether he took it in 10 billion years or whether he did it in 5 minutes, all of what we see around us is an incredibly wonderful creation and couldn't have come about one iota of it by chance.
Michael? Michael Shermer?
Yeah, well, on the question of evolution, how does it work? Well, there's this misconception of the survival of the fittest. It's not fit as in physically fit or big or strong or fat. It's whatever it takes to get the genes into the next generation. Whoever leaves behind the most offspring that make it to the next generation and so on wins. There are examples of this. A species, Dr. Hovind said, we don't know what a species is, and we can define a species. A species is a group of actually or potentially interbreeding natural populations reproductively isolated from other such populations. Whatever it takes to reproductively isolate two populations, a mountain range, a hotel chain, an aqueduct, an ocean, a river, whatever, they get separated. Through mutation, they change a little bit. Through natural selection, they change, variation, sex, and so on. Then if they get back, the river dries up and the populations overlap again. If they've changed too much, they can't interbreed anymore. They are now, by definition, separate species. That is the origin of species right there. We have observed it lots of times in our own lifetime. In the late 1800s, Australian wallabies were introduced into Hawaii. Now the Hawaiian wallabies can no longer interbreed, because they've tried, with Australian wallabies because they've changed too much. New species. That's an example of evolution at work right there.
Dr. Hovind.
They're still wallabies. That doesn't prove they came from a rock. All right. I don't know. We're going to leave a lot of questions hanging here, which these things